So I realized, going back and editing the first episode, that we never did a full intro for this, and never once was my name spoken. So welcome to the Sad Boys Book Club. My name is Dusty,
And my name is Daniel.
and this is episode 2 of the Sad Boys Book Club, where we will continue our conversations about the House of Leaves. I did, and I think you did too.
Mhm.
What I am prepared for episode 1 now, so to say.
I'm sorry, what? I couldn't hear you there for a second.
I am now prepared. I have read the material required for episode 1.
Yes. We are now at where we wanted to have read for episode one. That
Yes.
is the very beginning of chapter 9,
Yes.
page 107.
Yeah, but before we go too deep into that, I wanted to talk to you about this, and I have been sitting on this for like 4 days, and I've been wanting to talk to you about it, but I'm like, I got to save it for the podcast because I just gotta save it for the podcast. And I already kind of hinted this to you the other day. Um, so and I've talked to you more or less a little bit about some of this in the past week. Uh, so I've been wanting to get back into my own personal writings and get back into a
Yes,
nice like kind of writing habit because writing is just a really healthy and creative hobby to kind of get into the habit of, even if you're not doing it professionally. It's great.
definitely.
Yeah, it's great for like your brain and your brain's health and your own mental health and all that other good stuff. So I want to
Yeah,
get back into
writing.
it.
I was just gonna say writing. Writing is thinking. It's just thinking longhand. You improve your you can see by my stammering that I have not been writing in a while, and I think that's kind of a thing that at least for me, when I'm in a more practice of writing, I get better at communicating thoughts because it's just like kind of like an exercise that allows me to order my thoughts in a more meaningful way, I would say.
Yeah. So, what I've been doing to try and I haven't actually started writing again yet. I actually want to get back to that today. I wanted to last night, but I got too tired. But what I've been doing to kind of get myself back into that motivated writing state is I've been listening to a lot of lectures and just general videos of Brandon Sanderson.
Hmm.
And I purchased Elantris and the Final Empire a couple years ago, and they've been sitting on my bookshelf because I was like, oh, I want to read Brandon Sanderson. I want to give him a try because I've always heard great things about him. And I had started the Wheel of Time, and I know that he finished the series for Robert Jordan after he died. And so I always wanted to give him a try, but I kept like kind of putting it off as like before I read Elantris because I wanted to start with Elantris because it's his first book, and I don't care what anybody, including him, what they say. I'm gonna start with his first book published, which would be Elantris. So I was putting it off for like years, for I guess years now, because I wanted to read other things first. I wanted to finish the first book of the Wheel of Time, which I haven't yet. I wanted to start reading the Eisenhorn trilogy for Warhammer 40k, which I haven't done yet. But I had like these lists of books I wanted to go through. I wanted to finish Dune, among other things. So this last week, I decided, fuck it, and I started reading Elantris, and it's really good. I love it.
That's really cool. That's the his Mistborn trilogy, right?
No, Elantris is so like all of his not all of his books, but like his
Mhm.
main fantasy books, all of his main fantasy books are all collected into the same universe known as the Cosmere.
Mhm.
It's like the backdrop for all of the books, but like each of the series, each of the individual series, and I think the standalones are separate as well, all take place on a different planet inside of the Cosmere universe.
Mhm.
So Elantris is a standalone book, though I've heard that he is planning sequels for it in the future. So it's a standalone book, and then Mistborn, the original Mistborn trilogy. and then Mistborn Era 2, which is 4 books, are all on the same planet. And then like the Stormlight Archive series is on its own planet. That's like his big, 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 big series. That's supposed to be 10 books long. Number 5 comes out next year.
Wow.
Then there's like standalones like Elantris, which is on its own world, and then I think Warbreaker is on its own world, and then there's like short stories. I don't know too much. I'm very very new to this. But yeah, I've been listening to a lot of his lectures and him talking to fans and talking about writing, and it's really helped me personally, like try and get an idea of like how I want to go back to writing and what I want to do because he's very easy to listen to because he's very he doesn't have that air of like arrogance or elitism or like like I'm a famous person so I have this gravity over me that makes me feel like I'm better than you, like you know what I mean.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
doesn't he
I've seen videos. Maybe not as many as you, but I've seen like a couple. Over the years, and he does kind of have strike you as more, very down to earth, pretty normal guy.
Yeah, so he's like very easy to listen to because of that, and he also is like really, really knowledgeable, despite the fact that he may not think he is as much, because he's a professional author. He's been doing this for 20 years now, and he knows what he's talking about. So there's a lot of really good information there, even if you're not wanting to write sci-fi or fantasy. I think a lot of it translates over. Like obviously, maybe not the stuff talking about magic systems, but a lot of the general writing does transfer over to even if you want to write like romance or action adventure or thriller or horror or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of got me back into an idea of wanting to start writing again, which you and I have talked about as well, separately. So yeah, to round it off, I started reading Elantris, and it's fantastic. I love it. I am on chapter 5 right now, which I think is somewhere in the ballpark of like page 50, and it's pretty
Wow.
cool. And I'm looking forward to getting more into it as I go. But yeah, that's what I've been reading outside of House of Leaves this last week.
That's pretty cool. I've not really done like too much reading of like outside of House of Leaves. I haven't physically read too much. I have listened to a little bit of A Time of Contempt in the Witcher series by Andrzej Sapkowski.
Yes.
I've been really, really, really enjoying that. I started that, I guess, late last year. I think I'd actually never played or read or watched any of the Witcher movies, games, TV shows, what have you. But I don't know. It went on sale because of the new remaster for the next gen. So I went in, I was like, what the heck? I've heard good things about it. So I start playing it and immediately 100% into it, which is interesting because oftentimes I'm not always the biggest fantasy guy, at least historically. I can be pretty picky about what in the fantasy genre I like and what I don't like. Um, but I don't know, for whatever reason, it really just clicked with me, and so I went through and I got the audiobooks, and I've gotten through the first. Let's see, so the Last Wish is the first, I guess, canonically the first collection that's a collection of short stories. Then it's Sword of Destiny, then it's Blood of Elves, and then it's A Time of Contempt. So yeah, I guess that makes me. I'm about two-thirds of the way through the fourth book at now, and in a little over. Let's see, about. All right, looks like 2 weeks. Wow, it's really tearing through it.
Yeah. Um, which I'm glad you brought up the Witcher series because that does actually give me a great segue into something else I wanted to talk about. So I've gone through the entire Witcher series twice now.
Hmm.
The second time was like November, I think, November of this last year. The
Mm-hmm.
first time was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was like 2019, I think. And those I love those books. They're some of my favorite fantasy series of books like ever. They're great. I love the Witcher series. I love the characters and all that. But how I absorbed them. If you notice, I said I read them in the last 3 or 4 years, and you might be thinking, "Wait a minute! I thought you said you only read like 3 books in the last couple of years." Um,
Mm-hmm.
So something I realized that I didn't really mention when I was talking about how my lack of reading in the last decade was that I do a lot of my novel absorption in recent times through audiobooks. And I don't know. I know you and I might kind of have like minor disagreements on like the nuance of this, but I don't personally consider listening to an audiobook the same as reading a book. Like I don't consider it reading. Like I feel like that should be a very kind of like obvious thing to say because you're not reading, you're listening. I don't think it like they're both different means of consuming the same medium. So like I don't think that like, reading a book is inherently better than listening to an audiobook and vice versa. It's just kind of a what works for you kind of thing. Cuz like I have a friend who's dyslexic and I imagine audiobooks are much easier for him because reading is a much harder thing to do if you're dyslexic than it is if you're not, obviously. But yeah, I've listened to an insane amount of audiobooks in the last 5 years or so because it's super convenient. I can do it. I can listen to them while I work because I've had the luxury of the last couple of jobs I've had. They've allowed me to use like headphones and shit, so I can like listen to music or YouTube videos or audiobooks while I work. So it's allowed me to just blitz through so many things. Like I've listened to The Stand, which was amazing. I've listened to It, which was amazing. A lot of
Wow.
Stephen King. Like a lot of
Both
a
of
lot of Stephen King.
those those are like 40 out. Those would probably be like 40 hours, right?
Yeah,
Each.
for me that's one work week. Well, a little more than, but 2 work weeks really, I guess. Yeah, I've listened to the Witcher books, all of them twice. Only Season of Storms once though. Um, yeah, like I don't need to go through every single book. A lot of World of Warcraft books because I'm a nerd. Uh, but yeah, I've gone through a lot of books on Audible. And it's I do consider that as a means to consume novels. Like I do think it counts as. I don't think you're any less of a an enjoyer of novels or books or whatever for listening to audiobooks instead. But I do consider it personally to be different than having read a book because using your ears and using your eyes are two completely different things. But yeah,
I,
do you want to
I
chime in
guess
on audiobooks for yourself?
um yeah, pretty. I mean, similar. I feel pretty similarly in terms of like that. I've really, I've had a lot of I've listened to more audiobooks in the last several years than I've listened to or than I've read uh, physical books. Um, I don't know. I'm a little bit more as far as what it means to read. I guess I can understand from a mechanical standpoint it's different. You're encode the means that the information is encoded into your brain um, is like your eyes are like interpreting symbols versus ears interpreting sounds. But I don't know. I mean, as long as that information is still more or less being encoded, I'm kind of like I'm pretty lax. I don't really care if someone's like, oh well, I read it, but they're referring to listening to an audiobook. Not saying that you're like super strict about that necessarily. I'm just saying like just in general. I'm pretty laissez-faire about how whether it or not it is reading. Although I do kind of hew a little bit closer to your idea that it mechanically is different enough that I don't necessarily consider it the same activity, but I'm not really gonna fight somebody on, whether or not it is. I think at the end of the day, what really matters is probably how it's stored in your brain. I guess if that makes sense. And I don't really know a lot about the neuroscience of how that works, so I'm just like I'm happy to just kind of be like, okay, whatever works for you, you know.
Yeah, I can only talk to personal experience, but I personally feel like if I physically read the book, I feel like it is stored in my memory a little better than if I listen to a book. That's just I don't have any scientific evidence to back this up. This is purely anecdotal based on what I feel like it is, not what I actually know it is. But I feel
It
like
might be different from person to person too.
yeah, I could, because like for me, and I think part of it is because a lot of the times when I listen to audiobooks, it's when I'm like driving or when I'm actually working, so I am
Hmm.
multitasking in a sense. So maybe I'm not quite absorbing the information the same way I would if I was like staring at the text on the page and like trying to like making an actual effort to read it, like using my full mental capacity to focus on the book.
Mhm.
Um,
That that's true. I think part of it also it's not even necessarily just the mechanics themselves. It's like how much focus you're giving something because
yeah, exactly.
I, I think I've done similar things where I'll like have it going, as well I'm like commuting or running errands or something like that. And obviously I'm paying more attention to like okay, the road and stuff, but I'm still following the thread of the book. I guess that's probably not the same as, I'm sitting down. If I were to sit down and listen to the audiobook while I don't know, I'm just sitting and more, my entire focus is on that.
Yeah, this is a bit of an aside, but kind of like to what you just said. A long time ago, this would have been 2015 or 2016. I remember there was a day. It was one of my days off from work, and I had the audiobook for Jurassic Park. And there was an entire day where I woke up and I just really wasn't feeling like getting out of bed. So I flipped on Audible on my computer, and I just listened to Jurassic Park for the entire day. I think I had like 7 or 8 hours left in the audiobook, and I didn't get out of bed that entire day, and I finished that audiobook. And that was fantastic. It was a
The
very like lazy
audiobook
day.
for The audiobook for Jurassic Park is really, really good. That's one that I've done over the last four. I think it was about 4 years ago. I did that, and it was phenomenal. I
Yeah,
don't know. I this may be heresy for our age group. I was always just kind of like okay on Jurassic Park. It was never like, oh, I love this movie. It's not to say I have a negative opinion on it, but it was just like okay, yeah, it was pretty good. I liked it, but the to me the audiobook was, and I probably guess by proxy the book was a lot. I found a lot more interesting.
yeah. I'm of the opinion that I love Jurassic Park the movie. Like it's definitely up there for me in terms of like Spielberg movies. Uh, if I had to pick a, this isn't a movie talk, but if I had to pick a favorite Spielberg movie, it might be Raiders of the Lost Ark. But yeah, Jurassic Park's definitely up there for me. In terms of like Spielberg films. But like I when I was going into the audiobook, my thought process was like I imagine this is going to be a very good book because I've heard so many good things about it, and I know how revered Michael Crichton is as an author. I've only ever listened to the audiobook of the first Jurassic Park, so I haven't read anything else of his work, but I know he's considered to be like a really, really phenomenal author, which I'd love to get into
Mhm,
more Crichton in the future if I ever have the opportunity or the time really.
yeah.
So my going into it, I figured that I would like the book, but I wasn't entirely sure how I'd feel about it compared to the movie because I was kind of going into it with the bias of having seen the movie many times first, kind of like with like I don't want to say this, but like kind of like with like Lord of the Rings, where if you watch the movies first, then you read the books, you might find the books kind of boring comparatively, especially Fellowship, because Fellowship
Hmm.
has a lot more tacked on. Or let me put it this way: I don't want to make it sound like the okay. Let me put it this way. There is a lot of stuff before Rivendell that is taken out of the books for the movie. Like in the movie cuts out a lot of the first half of Fellowship of the Ring because the first half of Fellowship of the Ring is purely them heading to Rivendell, and like it takes out the bit where Frodo holds onto the ring until he's 50 because his thought process is Bilbo went on his adventure in The Hobbit when he was 50, so I'm going to wait until I'm 50 to head out on my own adventure. And when Bilbo gives Frodo the ring on his 111th birthday, I think Frodo's like, oh, I want to say he's in his 20s. He might be in his early
What?
30s. Yeah, he holds onto the ring for like 20 years or more.
Okay, I'm
Before leaving
just
the Shire.
I'm gonna beef with the Tolkienites right now. That is so whack. That is so That is such a whack plot point.
I
that is
it does
that's silly.
it does make sense when you're reading the book. I'm not giving it the full context, so you're only getting like an abridged version of it. But yeah, so when he leaves the Shire, really the movie doesn't cut out too much. It's mostly it just basically cuts out Frodo being like, I'm gonna sit on this for a while and then I'm gonna leave, and then he leaves. It's not as crazy as you'd think. But after they leave and they meet up with Merry and Pippin and they're heading to Rivendell and all that other fun stuff. Actually, before they meet up with Merry and Pippin, there's a whole little bit where Frodo and Sam are hanging out with this man called Tom Bombadil, and he's this really weird, strange anomaly of a person that we never really get a lot of context on in terms of like who he is and what he can do, like his capabilities are, because he puts the ring on his pinky finger and nothing happens, and it's like this really kind of amazing moment for the readers and for Frodo and Sam, because it's just like, oh, he put the ring on and he didn't turn invisible, and it's already been established at this point that's what it does. So you kind of get this idea that he's a lot more powerful than he like gives off. But it amounts to nothing really in terms of like the grand scheme of the novel, other than this is this character and he is more powerful than you think, but you'll never see him again. Yeah,
Doesn't he like sing a song too? I feel like I've heard like he's like sings some sort of weird, oh, I'm Tom Bombadil, some kind of weird song
yeah.
like that.
He sings his own theme song, yes, but there are a lot of songs in the Lord of the Rings, a lot more than the movies would allow you to think. But
Well, that kind of makes sense, that sort of like medieval culture of like folk songs, and that makes sense.
yeah, but yeah. Anyways, when they're heading to Rivendell, they meet up with Merry and Pippin. They go through this area called the Barrow Downs, and it's this whole it's like a dark, evil, foresty kind of place, and they get
Hmm.
captured by creatures, and that's where they find their weaponry. Like in the movie, I think it's like Aragorn gives them swords until
Hmm.
Frodo gets Sting from Bilbo in Rivendell. But no, in the books, it's they get their weapons in the Barrow Downs. They find like this essentially treasure trove of fallen warriors, and they find a bunch of weapons that'll suit them. And I think for like Merry and Pippin, those are the weapons they take throughout the rest of the trilogy. I could be wrong on that. It's been a long time. But to make a long story short, there's a lot of stuff, especially in Fellowship, that gets cut out from. This was about Jurassic Park, by the way. This is how this started. This whole story is
uh,
about Jurassic Park. Uh, so there's a whole lot of stuff that they cut from Fellowship from the book, and I personally think it makes the movie better, because this stuff would have dragged the movie down substantially, because it's just I personally find the Barrow Downs tedious when I'm reading through Fellowship. I love Fellowship. I love I love all three books. The books are amazing, but I find the first half of Fellowship, in between them leaving the Shire and then making it to Rivendell, kind of a bit tedious at times. Personally, I know that might be heretical to say for a lot of Tolkien fans, but I just don't much care for the time in between the Shire and Riverdale and the Fellowship book. Everything else is great, but like that, it's a little rough for me. But to get this back to my main point for Jurassic Park, I understand that there were probably going to be more things in the book that weren't in the movie, because that's just how adaptations work. But man, I was not expecting to like the book so much more than the movie. Like it was a it was an experience. There's the aviary in the book, which they kind of bring back around in Jurassic Park 3, the movie. But
hmm.
how they did it in the book was fantastic. And then there's the whole sequence, which is basically the entire plot line for Grant and the kids, where they're being stalked by the T Rex like the entire time.
Right.
And that was just amazing. There's the part where they get to the lake and they see the T Rex sleeping, and they have to they have to take the boat and sneak it out into the ocean, or not the ocean but the lake, and get the
Hmm.
get away from the T Rex before it gets to them. And that's a really tense scene, and that's really cool. And that's what ends up leading to the aviary. Then there's the whole sequence with the Velociraptors in the what was the building called? Uh, in the building. In the movie, it's the kids hiding from the raptors and locking one in the freezer. In the book, it's Grant essentially doing a 1v3. against the raptors, and him just systematically killing all three raptors, and it's so cool. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Why was this not in the movie?
Probably would. It was probably. I bet they thought to put it in the movie, but it was probably just a really tough to get it to film. They probably had a hard time getting the like the CGI. And not that it wasn't an achievement for CGI at the time, but I'm sure that there was like they had to be strategic about how and when to deploy their resources.
Yeah,
And so I guess it's probably they probably I don't know. Spielberg is a very canny director in that whenever he comes to like limitations or like the famous story about how Jaws they could never get the shark to really work. So what they were very strategic, at least because it was a mechanical thing. It was not CGI really. So they had to be very strategic about how and where it was deployed. And I imagine it was something similar. And I think also the movie is a little bit more oriented towards the kids.
yeah,
I think that's a reason. Maybe that's a reason why I prefer the book to the movie. This is just like a personal thing. I don't I've never been like super into like stories about kids. Even when I was a kid, I didn't want the protagonist to be a kid. I wanted it to be an adult.
yeah,
And so I've never, for whatever reason, it just doesn't. It's not that I dislike them. It's just that I don't connect with them as readily as like the as like the story told a different way. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I think I like that better.
yeah.
Also, the book, um, it is missing some pretty significant big moments like I mean, the Unix system comment.
I was gonna go into that. I was gonna say I much prefer in the book how it's I forgot their names, the kids' names. Tim, I think, is the kid, the boy. Um, if I remember correctly, in the book, their ages are actually swapped, where Tim is the older sibling, not the younger sibling, and Tim is the one on the computer in the book. And in the book, he's just frantically just trying everything. He's like, I don't know, I have a computer at home, so maybe I'll be able to figure this out. And then he's just clicking buttons and just trying to get something to work. And then finally, something works. It's just one of those not quite like an ass pull kind of thing, but I feel like it's much more realistic than it's a Unix system. I know this, and then suddenly you have this 11-year-old girl hacking into a theme park mainframe and doing everything that just needs to be done in order for the heroes to triumph over the dinosaurs. Like it's great in the movie. Like it's stupid, but it's great. But I feel
Her
like
name is Lex. I
thank
couldn't
you,
remember, but yeah, it's Lex.
thank you. But yeah, that is. I much prefer the book's version of just a child frantically slamming his hands on the keyboard, and then this is. They're also kind of. It's kind of stupid both ways. Let's be real. It's a little kid somehow figuring out a security system, and that Dennis Nedry, who was supposed to be a programming genius, locked everyone out of. You have this kid going like, I don't know what I'm doing, and then it works. Which they're
I don't know. I mean, I've had users find very astonishing ways to break like the programs and reports that I've built so over the years. So you I don't know. Maybe that you need somebody that doesn't know what they're doing just so they know that they can break it in the right way.
Yeah, but I just thought that was a little better than just 11-year-old girl hacking into the system and everything's all hunky dory. So that's just that. I don't know. They're both great in their own ways, but they're also both really dumb in their own ways. But the movie's fantastic. The book is fantastic. I would recommend both to whoever. Anyways,
Yeah.
do you wanna hop into House of Leaves, or do you have anything else you want to talk about before we hop to that?
No, no, I'm good. I'm good to talk about House of Leaves. One thing I want to say, I want to have a formal apology to the author of House of Leaves. I'm sure everybody who's heard our last episode was probably cringing as we refer to the author as Danielewski. Um, I had a feeling that was wrong, so I looked it up after that, and it's apparently Danielewski. It's like I guess the Polish pronunciation of the W is a lot closer to a V.
Well, it's your fault, so I am not apologizing.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I led us into that one. I was with the blind confidence of a guy that's only read a word that he's never heard out loud.
Yeah. But one
So
thing I want to say before we get too deep into it, because I will forget otherwise, um, I'm pretty sure it's both Zappano and Johnny Truant that do this, but I want to say I've only seen it once with Zappano, and I've seen it like 30 times with Johnny Truant. I hate, 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 hate that he says would of, could of, should of. I hate it. That is one of my
I
major, 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 major pet peeves with writing is would of, could of, should of. It's up it's higher up, but it's in a similar vein to people confusing lose and loose when they're writing.
yeah this company that I worked at years ago. There everybody who worked at that company, seemingly every single person, did not know the could have, would have, should have. They didn't know that it was a contraction would of apostrophe ve. They so everybody got that wrong, and it was like being in the Twilight Zone. Just everybody on all these emails and IMs just constantly getting it wrong, and it was just like a slow boiling torture.
Yeah. I
But
don't
yeah, that's something that I've seen with I noticed more with that was Johnny. I don't remember seeing Zampano making that mistake.
Yeah, cuz I remember thinking that I thought that it might be something that Danielewski was doing intentionally for Johnny. Then
I think that is true. I because I think Johnny he doesn't. Well, we'll get into if you want, we can talk about it now. But we've learned in this last section that we've read that his education, his formal education, uh, ended pretty early. He dropped out.
Mhm.
So, but he's smart enough to to write all this stuff and write it in an interesting way. Um, but he's like his formal education, is not.
It's lacking.
Yeah, it's he just didn't. He's just he probably never got to the point where they're like really drilling down on that kind of stuff.
I was reading the book this might have been last week actually when I caught this before chapter 5, and I saw a lot of Johnny Truant. I would have done this, I could have done that, whatever. And yeah, I was thinking that maybe it was something that Danielewski was doing specifically for Johnny Truant, just as part of his character. But then I saw it happen with Zappano in the House of Leaves, and I don't know if it's happened more than once, but I saw it one time, and I know I saw it in there one time because my brain just broke for that second, and I'm like, oh, either both Zappano and Johnny Truant are illiterate, or Danielewski is illiterate, which I realize is an exaggerated thing to say because he is a very talented writer. But it breaks my brain. I hate it. It's just I don't like being a grammar Nazi, but some things I feel like are perpetuating the ruination of intelligence in America or the Western world as a whole, and really bad writing techniques like would of or I can't believe we're going to lose this game or things like that. I just look at your text and fix it, please. It bothers me.
do not do not text Dusty. Do not bring any of that weak sauce into his text. All right. Make sure it's punctuated. no emojis, no abbreviations. I'm talking the full King's English
I'm
whenever
not
you're
I'm not going that far. Like you can use you are if you're gonna say you're. I'm not going to, but you can. Whatever. It's just a shorthand thing for the convenience of texting quickly. But I do think some people go a little too extreme with things like that, and they have an entire. Especially if you're like 50 and you're doing that, it's like, man, you're just trying a little too hard, aren't you? But
I think in those cases it's just they just assume that's how you're supposed to do it. They're like, oh well, people, that's what the young people do, so I guess that's how you do it.
one of
Uh,
those
but that,
uh, one of those how do you do fellow kids kind of moments.
exactly, yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
But I just had a thought here. You know how the whole Johnny with the water heater moment from, if you remember from the
yeah,
first episode that we did. What if that's another water heater moment that he didn't signify? Because if you were saying that's something that we've noticed as being characteristic of Johnny's writing, maybe that's something that he slipped in there at that moment. If maybe we could go back and look for it sometime and kind
well,
of see if we could contextualize. But that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about that moment. If Zampano is making that mistake.
I do remember there was another sequence of Johnny adding something into the House of Leaves that he mentions. I can't remember what it was specifically, but I remember there was another instance where he said that he added that in. Or maybe the editor said he added that in. I don't remember which it was.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I think that's something that I need to be more diligent about looking, is to kind of like see if I can ever detect like a wandering tone to kind of maybe indicate maybe this is not Zampano, but rather Johnny talking here.
Yeah. Um, and I want to get this out of the way now too, because I don't want to have a bit of a whiplash where it's like I love this, I hated this, I love this. Um, the first third of chapter 5 was one of the worst, most insulting pieces of a book I've ever read, and I hated it, and I never want to read it again. It was awful. I was complaining to my wife about it constantly while we were going through it, and I hated it. It sucked. It was bad. It was terrible. It was useless. It had no purpose existing. It was brought back at the end of the chapter for like one payoff line that did not need to be in there because it added nothing to the book other than being like, "Hey, remember when I spent 13 pages talking about echoes? Here's an echo." It was so dumb, and the Johnny Truant tangent that was like 3 pages long in it was nonsense. It added nothing. He was just saying words like they didn't mean anything. At least to my maybe my brain was too fried to catch meaning, but they didn't mean anything. He was just like, "Oh, Zappano is talking a bunch of bullshit, so I'm going to too." And it was bad, and I hated it. Nobody needs to read 13 pages about fucking echoes. I'm sorry, it's stupid, and I'm really frustrated about it because I hated it, and it was a horrible hour of my life where I was like, I can't believe I have to get through this. And you're like, it'll get better, and it did. To be fair, it got way better. I loved the book after that, just like I loved the book before that. But oh my god, I hated it, and I just want to vent about it because it was so bad.
Yeah, that was a low point for me, at least so far. It reminded me of trying to read. I took a physics of sound class when I was in college, and it was excruciating. It was sometimes it was just like I'm just trying to listen to I'm not. I would not regard myself as a particularly mathematic or scientifically minded person. Um, I have other things that I'm more interested in personally and more naturally inclined towards. And it was just like it was just pulling teeth, trying to kind of like puzzle out. Okay, so what exactly is being said here? I'm gonna look back, see if I took any notes, because I do kind of take notes as we go here. Um,
I should pull up your notes while we're talking.
okay. Okay, I think it was around. Okay, hold on. Okay, so
Here's
chapter
here's one
five
you
starts at
said.
40.
Yeah, here's one you said for page 48. Johnny recommending we skip the echo passage except for the end musing on blindness. Basically, what I did. That's
Oh,
that's another thing I want
that's
to point out is him saying that we can skip this is one of the most patronizing and insulting things you could ever do to your reader. To basically just tell them, hey, all of this shit that you just read that was really bad and tedious and wordy and means nothing to even the plot of this chapter. Yeah, you could have skipped that.
yeah. That was so that I yeah. I basically just that was rough. I see formulas and I'm like, nope. I'm gonna keep moving.
Yeah, that's another
So
thing. It's like, oh, here's the mathematical formula of echoes, and I'm like, nah, I'm good, bro. Like, I don't need it. I don't need it, man.
it's I will say to kind of loop back to kind of something we talked about during the preamble, the pre-ramble, as it were. The the sign the way that Danielewski does the science in this book, I don't necessarily find very engaging. It doesn't feel whereas like a Crichton, you know, obviously a lot depending on the books, the science presented in the Crichton books is often quite dated compared to our understanding or flat out wrong compared to our understanding of science issues or scientific problems and questions. But it just I had a real but you can kind of go through it and you're like, okay, yeah, okay, cloning, frogs, yeah, whatever, cool. You know, you're just kind of you can kind of he does a good job of if it's all B I'll put it this way, if it's all BS, it sounds good enough. Whereas this, it's just and you can kind of go with it. This was just kind of this is kind of rough.
Yeah. I don't have my book in front of me. I can get up and grab it in a minute if I need to. But my takeaway here, for anybody who hasn't read the book and wants to read it, is just skip it. Honestly, just skip it. It does not add anything to the story. It's the start of chapter 5. For my copy
So
of the book, I think I want to
41
41 is the page that it starts.
41 to 48
I
is you can basically skip until
I'd
the
argue like
the begin.
53 if I remember correctly.
Well, I think 48 is when Johnny says you can go ahead and you can just skip that whole bit except for the passage on blindness, which let's see if I can. Okay, okay. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Um, Unfortunately, humans lack the sophisticated neural hardware present in bats and whales. The blind must rely on the feeble light of fingertips and the painful shape of cracked shin. Echolocation comes down to the crude assessment of simple sound modulations, whether in the dull reply of a tapping of the cane or the low eerie flutter of a simple word, perhaps your word, flung down an empty hallway long past midnight. Yeah, that's pretty much all you really need to
I will
take away
say
from.
I did like that
Okay.
line, the flung down the hallway long past midnight. I liked that line.
No, no, I think Johnny is very, and by extension Danielewski is very correct in saying you should skip it except for that part because it's good. It's actually very good and very thought provoking. But the everything before that was like thought terminating. You just see it and your just brain is just shuts off.
Yeah. This I promise this is relevant. Did you ever watch the show Justified?
Heard of it, never saw it.
One, watch it. It's amazing. I think you would love it. It's Timothy Oliphant and Walton Goggins, and as you know, Walton Goggins is one of my favorite actors. He's horribly underrated. Um,
Well, I think I confused it for what is that show about crooked cops in LA? It was the same kind of The Shield. I think I just confused it for The Shield or something.
I've never watched The Shield. I've always wanted to give it a try, but I've heard it's really good. But I've never watched it. I maybe I will eventually. But no,
That's
Justified
a
is the one.
CCH Pounder
Yeah, Justified is the one
TV
with.
show.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I know. I was just saying I think that was the CCH Pounder TV show that in Always Sunny that where Dennis does the impression, the famous impression of CCH Pounder. I think that's where it comes from. The
Oh,
Shield.
okay.
Now that I think about it.
Um. Sorry, you just derailed my thought process with the Sunny reference. Uh, um. Anyways, yeah, that's the one with Timothy Oliphant where he wears the cowboy hat, and it's in Kentucky, I think is where it takes place. It's a very very good show. It's not a western; it takes place in modern times. He just wears a cowboy hat because, in his own words, I tried it on and it fit. But it's a fantastic show, and I highly recommend it. Anyways, Walton Goggins' character, um, he is a very very talkative character. And there's a great line in one of the later seasons. I want to say like maybe season 5, maybe season 6. There's a great little line where he's talking to this dude who's essentially holding him at gunpoint. And oh yeah, he says the dude that's holding him at gunpoint says, "I love the way you talk, using 40 words when 4 will do." And it's I feel like that is a perfect encapsulation of Johnny Truman. He is Boyd Crowder in House of Leaves.
He does, I think, but I think that's kind of like his thing is like he even talks about it in this last grouping that we read of chapters. He mentions that like just that like I I don't want to say he's a compulsive liar necessarily, but he does say that like the embellishment kind of almost happens by itself when he finds himself like talking, you know.
Like he can't
Like
help
he just
himself.
exactly. He just kind of like go. He's just kind of always and just going with the flow. It just free, almost like free associating over his stories, you know.
He's a natural
And I think that
storyteller.
he is, and that's why some of these things are very engaging. But like, it's kind of like it's when it works, and when it doesn't, you're kind of like, okay, well,
You're saying 40
interesting.
words where 4
That's
will do.
exactly.
Yeah. I will
Um,
say,
but
I don't know about you, but for me personally, I think I prefer Johnny Truant's story over the House of Leaves.
you mean the Davidson record?
Well, yeah, like
I think that.
the House of Leaves is the book that was written by Davidson. Because like if you look in your novel, on the title page it says The
Okay.
House of Leaves by Zappano with introduction and notes by Johnny Truant.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Oh, hold on. I'm lost in the. It's after the introduction, right?
No, it's after the copyright page.
Okay, that's interesting because
Or I'm
there's
sorry,
this
no, it's not.
page before chapter one, the page before chapter one. It says the Davidson record. There's a blank page except for the phrase or the Davidson record.
Yeah, that's like the bulk of the book is the Davidson record, and then like that's like the bulk of the House of Leaves, and then the rest of the House of Leaves are the exhibits and the appendix, which are like
Hmm.
additional material to add on to the
Oh,
Davidson
okay.
record.
That's interesting. I did not I didn't think about that, but yeah, I'm looking at that page now.
Somebody
House of
didn't
Leaves
skim
by.
their book before reading it.
I guess I guess I did. It's yeah, because that's the page before the copyright information. All right, well then I've been mentally categorizing this all wrong. Um, I've just been referring to the Zampano story as the Davidson record. I think in my thoughts and in my probably in my notes too.
I mean, you're not wrong, to be fair. Like nothing you've said is wrong.
Yeah, it's okay.
You're
That's
just
interesting.
yeah, you're not being like you just haven't been being global. You've just been being like more narrow focused on like specifically the Davidson record, which
Mhm.
yeah, you're correct. You're still correct in it. We're both right here.
That's interesting that the House of Leaves is a book within the book called House of Leaves.
Yeah, it's just another layer of meta storytelling.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I do prefer Johnny Truant's stories personally, which it's not that's not at all a knock on anything to do with like the Davidson record because it's really interesting and I'm really enjoying that too. It's like a great found footage in book form kind of thing. But I am more engaged with Johnny Truant's possibly fictitious floating through his life in a post discovering the House of Leaves manuscript life.
There, it definitely has some really interesting moments. Like just after all of that stuff about the echoes. I promise we're not going to keep talking about that. But like that's he has some very interesting like his how he talks about his boss. Let me see if I can get to it easily. Let's see.
Are you
Get
talking about
to
the when he has that thought, but he actually says it out loud?
yes.
It's like the like the mutant has opposable thumbs or something like that.
Oh no, that was during a fight. It was
Oh, you're right.
that's
I'm yeah.
okay. But anyway, I just like how he describes his boss as this guy that's just like this like former art school guy. He talks about like, oh, I used to live in London. I think most people have met a similar kind of guy that's just like very tedious, very tiresome, thinks very highly of themselves and their art, but is just like just completely insufferable. Um, I think that's around the same time that uh, Thumper comes into Johnny's narrative, or I know she's mentioned before,
Yeah,
but I think he
Thumper
talks about
proper.
meeting. Yeah, that's how he I think he that's where she's coming to get the tattoo, and he's getting his boss tells him to hang up. You know, he's like, hey, stop stop sitting around and hang up her pants or whatever.
Yeah. I want to say something real quick. I'm jumping ahead, I think, to chapter 8, but I have a theory that I want to posit right now since you're talking about Thumper, because it has to do with her. Thumper is Ashley, right? Like her name is Ashley in it.
I don't know. I
I think
genuinely don't know.
I think Ashley is Thumper because once again I'm jumping ahead to chapter 8 here. There's the bit where he's talking about how he pages Thumper again, and she doesn't call him back. Then he has a voicemail from someone named Ashley saying to call her back that he ignores. And then when he goes on that kind of like pseudo date with Thumper, he just ends up telling her about like his life ostensibly, and he mentions he specifically points out that when he mentions the voicemail from Ashley, that she laughs at it. And it's only when he says he's talking about her telling him telling her things, and then I'm gonna have to dig for this and find it later. Um, but he mentions that he got the missed call and voicemail from someone named Ashley, and she laughs at that. I think she is Ashley because Thumper is a name that he invented, and she finds it funny when he calls her Thumper, which I think is very very. I get secondhand embarrassment from him sitting there calling her Thumper to her
A lot
face.
of the things in this part, I think you can fairly have secondhand embarrassment too. Like when he gives her a copy of all the stuff he wrote about her,
Yeah,
it's just like no. Let me. I think I even that's. Let me see if I can find my notes
yeah.
for
Which
that. I
he's
think my note is literally just no. Oh God, please no. Why?
yeah.
Something to that effect.
Which I mean, it's made out to where he is at least a pretty good looking dude, so he I guess gets a pass for that. Oh, you're hot, so it's
Okay,
fine.
here's the Johnny is still in a state of extreme limerence over Thumper and oh God, no, why? And then it's he gave Johnny who can barely talk. That's true. To this point, he has said, I think maybe 20 words to her, like including most of it are like just like very perfunctory getting to know you stuff, and he gives her this whole spiel, or this written spiel about how he's just like head over heels in love with her and like very visceral descriptions of her, and it's just like, oh, that is not, dude, that is not the play. And so she what makes it worse is like she reads it right there, and then his boss also reads it, and it's just like that was like that was that was people talk about how cringe like that Scott's Tots
I my brain
the
also
episode
went to
of
The
The Office.
Office.
it was like this is so much worse.
Yeah. But
Oh, also, she after this is the thing that's crazy. She gives him her number to because we were talking about how he tries to call her. After that, she chooses to give him her number, which is just a certified crazy move. Somebody gives you like a manifesto about you, and you're like, yeah, okay, seems good enough. Let me give him my number, and then he doesn't call her. Later when he gets off, he chooses to call her at 3:23 a.m., which is another certified crazy move.
this is also the same woman that, after this situation, thinks it's totally appropriate to talk to Johnny about how amazing her new boyfriend is in bed. So, I mean, she's not
I mean,
exactly the most, I don't want to say civilized woman ever, but I'm not trying to imply that she's a stripper therefore she's trashy, because that's not what I mean. I think,
well, I think Johnny puts it best when he describes her as uninhibited.
yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Because I don't think being a stripper automatically makes you trashy. I think that she is a stripper that just happens to be trashy. And
Yeah,
she
it's
she
it's
has a she has a tattoo right above her vagina that says like the happiest place on earth, right?
yeah, that's.
That's worse than a tramp stamp. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. That was not
Well, I think
wouldn't be my idea.
I think
Wouldn't be I go ahead.
I think the only worse tattoo you can get than that is a tramp stamp with an arrow pointing down saying exit only.
That's ugh. There was a lot of bad tattoo ideas going on at this time period.
Yeah,
It was just a bad time in general for like aesthetics and
it
fashion and
really
that kind
was.
of. And I'm a little I'm still I mean yeah I guess not fully because everything must come back but I am a little bit like a little bit unsure of how about people trying to bring this era back in terms of fashion. It's just it was not a good era. It just wasn't.
I agree. But yeah, the name Thumper, as I understand it, originally comes from his mental euphemism for her vagina.
I thought she had like a Bambi tattoo.
It was it a Bambi tattoo? Uh, I could be wrong here. I thought it had to do with the whole thing with like her, he shows off her rabbit and it's the happiest place on earth. I could have read that wrong. If I'm wrong, then excuse me. Um, but all the same, though, general point still stands that the name
Okay,
Thumper is a creation of his too, since he never bothered to ask her name.
yes, he said suffice it to say the second I saw that rabbit was the second I started calling her Thumper.
That rabbit being her vagina or a tattoo.
Uh, Hold on, let me actually read back.
Would you say that Johnny Truant might possibly be either a sex addict or B, a sexual deviant?
I think definitely he's supposed to be like an addict of some kind. I think he's that's just kind of his thing is how he. Well, we see a lot of things about his life that have been like pretty traumatic and pretty
How
and continues his life continues to be traumatic. So I
ha,
think that's one of the things he does, like the alcohol, the drugs, that kind of thing. That and the the sexual escapades, I think those are all things that make that he does to kind of self-medicate.
how I understand it is it was a response to him being raped by his stepfather. That's how I understood that passage to go.
That's interesting.
Did
um
did you interpret that differently?
I interpreted that as his stepfather beat him up,
Well, I I
but I,
I
I
don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think he beat
not
him and raped him.
necessarily, but I just kind of my mind didn't necessarily go there, but I wouldn't say that's a false interpretation necessarily either. that whole passage was just very troubling. When we're talking about, Johnny and how he's, um, he's his father's passed, and he's staying with his family, and this guy, he's just this completely overbearing, loose cannon, you know. Uh, I think a lot of people have known this kind of guy, this kind of uh, guy who is in the military and not really well adjusted, a very damaged person himself, and he demands everything be a certain way. I think it probably as his own way of coping, um, and Johnny, he's got a little bit of a wild hair, we'll say, and he's getting into trouble at school. He's getting into fights, and yeah, his not stepfather. He's not his stepfather. He's, I
Oh,
guess,
it's
his
adopted father, isn't it?
legal guardian. Yeah, adopted father, legal
Yeah,
guardian.
yeah, that's what it was.
Um, he, yeah, he takes him. He comes home from school. He's got like his knuckles are broken, and he's all beaten up. And then it says that he yells at his family. He basically gets them to leave, and then he takes them into a field, and then it's just kind of left ambiguous as to, at least from my perspective, it was ambiguous as to what happened. He said
Well,
he was going to take him to the hospital after,
it definitely is ambiguous for sure.
but he did say that's how the tooth got chipped. At least is like the
Yes,
tooth was chipped in that incident.
I found it. It's on page 93. It's the very last paragraph. It says Raymond took me somewhere else first. He let me actually back up. But we didn't go directly to the hospital. Raymond took me somewhere else first, where I lost half my tooth and a lot more too, I guess, on the outskirts, in an
Hmm.
ice-covered place surrounded by barbed wire and willows, where monuments of rust seldom touched lie frozen alongside fence posts, and no one ever comes near enough to hear the hawks cry. Now, I feel like his statement saying I lost half my tooth is the implied beating, and
Hmm.
a lot more too, I guess, is the rape. That's how I interpreted that.
You know, I think I agree. I don't know. I guess I just kind of missed that little and a lot more too, I guess.
I read
But
it like
I
3 times through that entire paragraph, being like, did I really just read a guy admitting that he was raped as a 12-year-old? Because that's fucked.
I think you're right. I think that's the implication that we were supposed to understand from that.
So
Wow.
I definitely think that that does play a large role in his sexual proclivities as an adult,
Hmm.
because a lot of times people that suffer that kind of abuse and trauma when they're younger, since it messes with their minds, their development, it's something that they end up leaning toward as an adult. It's the cycle of abuse, and it's horrible, horrible stuff, to say the least.
Yeah. I think you might be onto something there. I just kind of assumed it was a kind of self-medication, for just like his general, the difficulties of his life. But I think you are onto something here with like it is also a response to his direct response to the abuse.
To change the subject and get to more lighter themes, let's hop over to the Davidson record because Johnny's story's getting a little heavy.
That's true. When we last left off with Navidson, that they had they were looking at they were trying to just their problems were pretty small, relatively speaking, at the time. They were trying to figure out why the house there was a quarter-inch difference in the measurement from the house externally versus internally. When a whole foot opened up behind a bookcase, sending the books sprawling. But things they've gotten, I would say, unfathomably worse for them. Basically, the portal has really opened up in their house to this alternate dimension. Well, maybe not even an alternate dimension. I think this is something that we should get squared away. But this whole hallway leading into like this endless series of hallways has opened up in their house, and they're not handling it very well. They're making some strange decisions. They're not contacting anybody about it. They're really just decided, yeah, we're gonna get this local engineer guy that we know and my brother, and we're gonna figure this out. Um, at least I think that's kind of like Navidson's idea. Um,
Well, Navison wants the fame of it. He sees it as a because he went into the hallway and despite his wife telling him she didn't want him to, and it's an anomaly in and of itself when they found it, and then when his kids ran in it, he had to run in, grab them, and bring them out. Then when he went in it again and ended up getting lost and all that fun stuff, and it becoming a labyrinth, I think it became more of a point of pride for him, and a this is my next Pulitzer kind of thing, where he can make this monolithic discovery. So I think there's a lot of pride and a lot of fame seeking here, and you can see the same thing with Holloway too.
yeah, that's true. I think that's something that I don't know how much we talked about Navidson the last time around. It's been a little bit since I listened back to what we talked about. But I think, yeah, that's a big thing for Davidson. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning war photographer, among other things. He's been around the world. He's pretty well known. I don't the book portrays him as being a very famous, oh, maybe not very famous, but famous enough. Like there's a one point where he hangs out with famous people that are myster pardon me. There's a part where he hangs out with two famous people that Zampano very pointedly leaves unnamed. So I'm just going to assume that it was Mike Tyson and Bob Dylan um,
Okay, interesting
that he was
choices.
hanging out with. Just I don't know. I just threw Mike Tyson in on a whim, but for some reason I really was picturing like like 1990, like Bob Dylan, like just before he got his like critical reappraisal and kind of like had like this that big second act like comeback moment. Like it was for some reason I just was picturing Bob Dylan there.
Yeah. Hey, Mac
As like
Tyson, let's go hang out with my friend Davidson.
I'm not going to attempt to Mike Tyson. I
That
feel like
sounds
that
like a
there would.
great idea, Bobby.
I think I don't know why. That was just my initial thought was like, uh, ooh, it's time to talk to my friend Davidson. That's a weird hallway, man.
That's kind of weird. I'll see you later. Bye.
Wow, this hallway is really freaking me out. I'm gonna leave.
Yeah. I'm
I
gonna
don't
go
know.
write another Grammy-winning album. Yeah.
I'm gonna go hang out with my friend Tom Petty and write the second Traveling Wilburys album.
Let's see. It was
That
what
I don't know.
1993 was the Davidson record.
I think no. I think the Davidson record was all this happened in 1990.
1990. Okay, I could actually still do this. I'm gonna say it was Kurt Cobain and Anthony Kiedis, and that's why Anthony
Like
Kiedis speaks nonsense in his music, and Kurt Cobain killed himself.
they learned they saw things that damaged them permanently.
Yep.
Um, I saw my llama gun or something in the hallway. The
Get it
that's
away! Get
that
it
was,
away! Get it away now!
I think that's it. I think that's better than Bob Dylan and Mike Tyson. It's clearly 20-year-old Anthony. Well, maybe not 20. He was probably like 25-year-old Anthony Kiedis and like 20-year-old Kurt Cobain. Just off of his tour for touring for with touring Bleach.
He'd have been
But
27, 28.
Anthony Kiedis,
Yes, he was born in 1962.
Wow, I forget how old he is. He's but they were like a band for like a whole decade before they really hit it big with Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which came out 1 year after this. So yeah, he was I would say Get It Away Now is Give It Away Now is was originally Get It Away Now, referring to whatever the heck is growling in these hallways.
Yeah, Under the
That
Bridge
is
was originally called Under Ash Tree Lane.
But yeah, anyway, they're things are heating up. I really like the characters. My I mean, I really like the Johnny portion, but I kind of am the inverse of your opinion. I really am more interested in the Davidson record. Um, maybe that is less sophisticated opinion because I'm like, ooh, what is in the hallway? What is in the hallway of mystery? But I'm totally invested. But I don't know. I really like the crew of characters that are surrounding that. Even Karen, I have a lot of sympathy for. I think she's just like you can clearly tell like she is really thrown, but she's not trying to
I
like let on.
I
Go ahead.
feel like we're lacking some context on possible infidelities on her part, at least implied, because of it seems like a lot of probably fake authors seem to think that she was very unfaithful to Davidson during their marriage and
Mhm.
like prior to the house on Ash Tree Lane, and I don't
Well, I
really
think I,
think we've had
I think
any.
that was something that is subtextual, where they say like the house is supposed to be a new start, and that's something that new start, huh? That's something that Karen refers to. He's like she says that even verbatim is like this house was supposed to be the next chapter of our lives. I think there was a lot of strain in their marriage, and I think that's a fair interpretation, especially with what Zampano is giving us in terms of, or is alleging these other authors are saying about this person that may or may not be real, Karen. There's the implication of infidelity, and there's this moment with Wax, who is one of Holloway's men, where there's like she's kind of like talking to him, and the implication is that she's being a little bit flirtatious with him, and he goes and he kisses her, and she's kind
She
of
eats his
the way
face in
that
return.
yeah, like Zampano is kind of implying that she's kind of into it.
That's putting it lightly.
So
Yeah,
I think there's, but I think even her, I think she's there's not that it necessarily would excuse someone's infidelity, but I think there's a lot of pain there too for her. Like there's this passage that I found very heartbreaking. Her bit about okay, um, when Diderot told the teenage Sophie Voland, "You all die at 15," he could have been speaking to Karen, who at 15 did die. To behold Karen as a child is nearly as ghostly an experience as the house itself. Old family films capture her athletic zeal, her unguarded smiles, the tomboy spirit that sends her racing through the muddy flats of a recently drained pool. She's awkward, a little clumsy, but rarely self-conscious, even when covered in mud. Um, so that's kind of her as a child. She gets a little older. Their former teachers claim that she frequently expressed a desire to be president, a nuclear physicist, a surgeon, even a professional hockey player. Um, all choices reflected an all her choices reflected unattenuated self-confidence, a remarkably healthy sign for a 13-year-old girl. And then it kind of goes, and then by the time she turned 15, all of that was gone. She hardly spoke in class. She refused to function in any sort of school event, and rather than discuss her feelings, deferred to the world with a hard and perfectly practiced smile. Um, Apparently, if her sisters to be believed, Karen spent nearly every night of her 14th year composing that smile in front of a plastic handled mirror. Tragically, her creation proved flawless, and through her near aphonia should have alarmed any adept teacher or guidance counselor. It was invariably awarded with the Periodic Prize of high school popularity. So I think something has happened to her, particularly when she was that age of 13, which is I think when Johnny or 14, which is when Johnny also went through a similar sort of trauma that has kind of altered her personality in such a way that she's very, I don't know, she's not able to, she doesn't really communicate very well, you
Yeah.
know. It's kind of closed her off, and is and she her personality is, it's difficult, it can be difficult anyway to discern. It's because there's a certain performative element to it. It's like who is Karen actually, you know?
hmm But something I want to point out though is that new start that she's talking about. The way that Zappano portrays it is that it's supposed to be about Navidson spending more time with his family rather than all of his time working and traveling the world to get his photographs and whatnot. We only ever
Hmm.
get outside of the scene in the kitchen with Wax. We only ever get told by other writers that there is an implication of infidelity on her part in the past. So I'm
Hmm.
wondering if
Well, there's also, we mentioned Wax, but we also she also kind of flirts with Holloway. Let me see if I can find that. But that
I
was
think it's more that Holloway flirts with her, and Navidson is taking it for being more than what it was. Because Zappano even says that Navidson was so worried about Holloway when it actually was Wax that was the one that he should have been worried about.
that's right. That's right. I remember that now.
Yeah, but like outside of the Wax situation, which there is a lot of context given the situation inside the house that has built to that moment. I don't necessarily know if there actually is any real evidence of infidelity on either of their parts prior to that, other than just other people saying, "Well, I think she's a whore," which
Hmm.
it's hearsay. So I don't know if I'm actually supposed to believe that she has been unfaithful to Davidson before, or if I'm supposed to just take it on blind faith based on what other people say about her. Because I don't know. I personally don't get that vibe from what I've been reading in the way, at least in the way that Zappano has been framing Davidson and Karen's relationship. It definitely feels strained, but there definitely also seems to be a lot of love between the two of them for each other. The problem, though, is
Hmm.
that they definitely are not compatible people. So that's why there is all of the tension, all of the rifts, all of the trouble, because he is someone who likes to travel, he's someone who's adventurous, he's someone who wants to go and put himself in danger if it means getting the shot, and she's someone who wants to have her family around her. So
Yeah, she craves that sort of security.
yeah, so that's where the tension and the I think what eventually leads to the situation with Wax in the kitchen comes from is all of that being built up from like everything he did in the past to all of it starting to crumble and get worse once again once the house starts being weird and the hallway appears. It just starts kind of adding all of that tension and strain on their relationship even more. But I find it funny that the person that she turned to when that tipping point kind of hits is a guy who wants to solo climb Mount Everest.
Wax, I got some thoughts about Wax. He was they the way they introduced him was very, very strange. They introduced him. Let's see. First
I
off,
was
if
waiting for
I
us. Yeah, I know this was
go
written in
ahead.
2000, but I was waiting for us to get a link to his Vine page.
He definitely seems like a 2015 through. He's like that a very specific genre of guy that you saw a lot more in like 2014, 2015 through 2020. You know.
hmm
like he feels like very of that time. Um, if I don't know if you noticed this, but the first time his name appears, there's like spaces in between the W, A, and the X. So it's like, well, I was wondering what was the deal with that.
I don't know if I'd look too much into that because I've also found some typos in the book. Like one of the times when I forgot if it was Johnny or if it was in the House of Leaves talking about a key. I saw in the paragraph they're talking about having a key, and then the second time the word key is written, it's spelled Kye. So it very well could just be a mistake that was either intentionally placed or just missed in the editing process because I have found typos in the book.
That's true. I think the book is supposed to be represent more of a manuscript than a finished product anyway.
Yeah, that's true too.
Um, but yeah, it was Wax. Okay, he's basically one of those like I don't know if you've ever spent any amount of time in Colorado. You know, even just like visiting, I'm sure you've encountered this kind of guy. He's like a one of those mountain party bros. Um, he's like always drinking and partying and that kind of thing. But it's kind of interesting that it kind of reminds me of like you said of like some sort of like wannabe Vine star type guy and the way he talks too. It's just I don't know, very strange. But what's really interesting is he acts. It says that he's very humble about climbing. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, he says Um, booze and women are one thing, but a rocky face is always better than you. And if you make it down alive, you're grateful you had a good trip. But it starts off with or does it start? Okay, yeah. Here when it's introducing him at first, he's like, and I'll tell you, or it's in one clip he tells us how he plans to eventually make a solo ascent of Everest's North Face. And I'll tell you this, more than a few people are betting I'll do it. It's like, okay, so it's like, is he humble or is he just like suicidally confident? You know,
Well, I'm assuming
I
that
found that very interesting.
humility that it's referring to is that he's humble in the sense that he takes the risks and the danger of rock climbing seriously. Not so much that he doesn't have an ego, it's just more so when I am climbing a rock, I know that I need to be doing everything exactly right or I will die. I think that's what it means when they said that he was humble about rock climbing.
I guess, but I just think it does speak to a certain sort of like just insane
He's a thrill
ego
seeker.
to even think you could do something like that. I would never even think to attempt something like that.
Yeah, I
I mean,
don't.
not that I'm a climbing specialist, but I don't think anybody really like would think, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to ascend Mount Everest by myself." That just sounds like suicide.
Yeah, I'll do the rock wall at a state fair, and then I'll. That's about where I draw the line.
Yeah, and even those, I'd want like a harness or something.
Oh, you have to have a harness on those.
I think there's some that you can free climb.
Oh man,
Maybe not at like a state fair, but like maybe like a climbing gym.
I
But
imagine so.
I would not want to try that. Let's see. And then there's also Jed, who is a very reserved guy. I don't he he did not really make much of an impression on me, and I think that's kind of by design. That's kind of the way that uh, Zampano has kind of excuse me, but he really didn't make an impression on me. And I think that's by design. I think that's kind of how Zampano wrote him. The only things I remember about him is that he likes the artist Lyle Lovett. Was like a country artist that was popular in like the 80s and 90s, kind of like, and then he was from New Jersey. Oh wait, one thing he has a fiance, but there's like he seems like a very like blank slate guy.
Yeah, my impression was Oh God, that poor fiance is about to lose her. That poor woman's about to lose her fiance, and I felt bad for her. That was my impression of Jed. Was I feel bad for his fiance?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think Jed's making it. He's got major not gonna make it energy.
Yeah, maybe it's because I have a spouse, but for me, he's the only one I want to make it because he has that fiance. I don't want her. I don't want her to have that heartbreak. Nah, man.
Right.
Let him live. The
He,
other two can fuck off and die for all I care.
which kind of brings us to the last guy, the leader of the expeditionary crew, Holloway, and he's like
To
I don't know
to full
how would you
circle it,
describe how would you describe Holloway?
I'm gonna full circle this. He's kind of like a Muldoon.
Hmm. He is kind of a Muldoon. To bring us back to Jurassic Park.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
like
he's.
Holloway's character as a foil to Davidson, but he's also kind of an ass.
I think that's fair to say. I think there's that's something that's interesting in the book is that it plays with this tension of Davidson and Holloway, both kind of like jockeying, literally and figuratively for the spotlight. Like there's the whole point where Holloway is flirting with Karen, and Davidson literally walks up to him and bumps him off of his wife. You know.
Yeah, and Davidson is surprisingly strong for his frame.
Yeah, I remember it. That almost sounds like Davidson wrote that. He's like, and by the way,
This guy was big and buff, and he looked like he was twice my size. But I walked up to him, I bumped him with my shoulder, and he had to stumble back a few steps. I won't brag, but I mean, I've been doing some push-ups in my office at night.
yeah, so there was a lot of that energy with the whole um,
What is it?
interactions between Davidson and Holloway.
Yeah, what is it?
Um,
The I do crunches every morning. I can do up to 1,000 now.
yes, yes, very much so. That this has led me to think we haven't really talked much about Tom, like almost at all.
You know,
And I think,
I don't
go
have
ahead.
a lot to say about Tom. He's just the supportive brother. Like there's not I don't really feel like there's much to say. He's just Navidson's supportive brother. He seems like he's a better father to Navidson's kids than Navidson is.
Well, I think it's tough for me to say. He is very supportive, and I love seeing the interactions with his with Davidson's kids, where he's like reading to them or building like a little a doll house for Daisy. But it just because I think Davidson's kind of got a lot going on right now, with the whole, you know, um, uh,
The
we need
whole
to come
think
up with a
about
term for it.
the whole think about my career.
Well, maybe, but like I think that they would that would take up a lot of mental space, no matter who you are. If there was like this gigantic chasm that is opened up in your house that contains, unending and increasing hallways that are shifting through space. I feel
Yeah.
like it would be difficult to be fully present as a parent, as a father, if that's happening around you. Especially when you're him and you're wanting to explore that
Mhm.
this expanse, but you kind of can't. Well,
Yeah.
there was kind of actually a very sweet moment. Speaking of when he did explore after Karen kicked him, sent him to the couch for the night after he scared off Anthony Kiedis and very young Kurt Cobain. Um, he he uh, he went in. He basically was just felt so compelled to do it. He did it, and he kind of got lost. And it was actually he found his way back because of he heard Daisy crying. She was standing in front of the hallway. I think when that. So that was. I thought that was a very nice moment there.
Yeah. In his head, he's thinking, "This is the first time I've ever been thankful I had kids."
maybe, maybe. Wait, I think there is a I'd like to see, I guess, more as like there as this develops, but I think there is a certain estrangement that Davidson does have with his kids. You see that when Chad mysteriously he looks, he has like a black eye. He looks a little beaten up. He won't tell Davidson or Karen what's wrong. I think that does kind of speak to a certain parental estrangement there.
Yeah, I do definitely think that Tom is for sure more of a family man, and Davidson is very much a career man.
Yeah, yeah, I think, and if I could remember better, I think there was probably a good reason for that. I remember they talked a little about their early years, but I can't quite call that to mind what was going on. But I think there was they were both like, I don't know. I guess I'm gonna leave it there because I don't want to just speculate without without having any clear memory of the text. But I remember that there was some sort of event in their early life, and then that I think that was just their two different. I think that's something that I'm coming to the realization of during this conversation, particularly, is that a lot of this is about how people things will happen to someone in their life and how they react, how it affects how they react from that point on.
Hmm.
I think that's kind of one of the themes of this book.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I got a question for you.
sure.
Do you think that Navidson truly believed that the growling was the house shifting, or do you think he was just trying to say that to make Holloway and his team less concerned about a potential monster hiding in the labyrinth? A minotaur, so to say.
That's a good question. Um, you know, I I I I'm inclined to believe that Navidson actually does believe it is the house shifting because a lot of the moments when we hear when they mention the growl, they also mention some kind of shift that has occurred in the house.
Hmm.
I think that is what Navidson believes, um,
Or wants to believe.
or wants to believe, or has maybe talked himself into. It's like, no, no, it's just a house moving. It's just a house moving. It has, something like that. But I think there is a certain when he allows Holloway to bring the rifle into the house after his initial misgiving. I think there is a certain subconscious, like if you really didn't believe and you really wanted to put your foot down, especially with Holloway, who he does not like, um, and is not afraid to even physically engage him. I think he's maybe subconsciously he subconsciously recognizes, okay, there is something weird in there. There is something that is causing the growling. But he has rationalized it to be the house shifting. But like subconsciously, he knows there's something in there that is dangerous. Or at least that's maybe my new synthesis take based on what you just mentioned.
Yeah. Let me throw a second question at you now, too. Do you think that the hypothetical creature inside of the labyrinth is the same creature that has attacked Johnny Truant twice now?
That's another interesting thing, because if you remember, Johnny Johnny kind of when they found Zampano, they found a bunch of like half-inch deep gouges in the ground, like around his body. There were no signs of a struggle, but they found that around his body.
There were also no signs
Um,
of physical harm to Zappano. It was ruled as just a, for lack of a better term, natural cause death.
yes, but I think there is something there. I think both in terms of there was something that physically, that its proximity, if nothing else, caused Zampano's death and is tormenting Johnny. Um, but I think it's also like, but in the sense that I think you're right. I think there's something that is Yeah, I think there's something that we're supposed to infer there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that whatever it is something like that. Let me see if I can find his freak out or Johnny's freak out.
Are you talking about the one where he fell down the stairs? Or are you talking about the first one?
No, the one where he got the scratch. Oh yeah, that's something.
The one
That's
where he got the
interesting too.
scratches when he fell down the stairs.
Okay, yeah, then I guess that one.
Yeah,
Do
because
you?
I want to know how Zappano died. Because there were the scratch marks on his floor, but there were no physical signs of an altercation on him himself. But we do know that it's definitely possible that Johnny's little, we'll just say for lack of a better term now, hallucinations of danger and of the creature are not exactly completely in his head, because he does get that scratch on the back of his neck that cannot be attested to him falling down the stairs with the tray of ink.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah, I
want to know how
think.
Zappano died, because this creature can theoretically have a physical presence in the real world and cause real physical damage both through Johnny's neck and the scratches on the floorboard, but it did not, at least as far as we know, physically harm Zappano. So
Yeah, I think that is something I would like to puzzle out a little more. My another thing that I'm kind of wondering about is how this thing, this entity, um, one, I guess let's get this straight. Do you think that the narrative of the Davidson record relative to the world of the story, Johnny's world, Johnny's story, do you think it is real?
I'm gonna answer your question with a question, and
Go ahead.
this just came to me. I swear to God, I haven't looked anything up. This is just a thought that I just had. Um, do you think, in the context of the story, Zappano is real?
I want to say yes. I want to say Zampano is a real guy. I mean, Johnny is not exactly a trustworthy narrator. I think we that's well covered ground both in this conversation and the previous one. But here's what leads me to believe he is. Like there's a lot of other people that know about him. Obviously we only know these people through Johnny's.
I was about to say that we only know them because of Johnny.
So that so I mean, unless that we can take Johnny as just like totally and fully just has no credibility whatsoever. If we can at least assume he has some credibility, at this point I'm going to assume. I think that he is obviously a habitual exaggerator, and I think that he is also his mental state is worsening. But I don't think I'm yet comfortable saying that he is totally uncredible. I think the people that he knows are real. Like I think he really does have a job in a tattoo shop. I really think that he's met, he Lude, a man named Lude, as his that's his friend. I really think that Thumper exists, and what's her name? The lady he talks to about or he means to talk to about the German translation. Like I feel like those are real people, or like the people that he talks to that he says like, oh yeah, and I reached out to this person and they were they either read to Zampano or they were transcribing his work for for his story, and they
Mm-hmm.
said this about him. So I guess my thought is Johnny is trustworthy enough that, or I feel like I can trust that the people that he's talking about are for the most part people that he has met.
Okay,
Um,
but let me just contradict everything you just said real quick.
okay.
What if Johnny isn't real?
How do you mean?
Like, what if? So this whole story so far, we're having to trust that it's this man named Johnny Truant who found these pages by a man named Zappano who just happened to die, and he is now giving us these pages as well as his thoughts on them.
Mhm.
What if that's not actually what's happening here? Like, I don't want to say what if Johnny is Zappano, but what if the author of The House of Leaves and the author of Johnny Truant's interjections are the same person? And I don't mean this as a it was all Mark Danielewski the whole time. I mean like in the story. What if we're looking at two personalities in one person, one being Zappano and one being Johnny Truant? And Zappano's death, quote unquote, was not a physical death, it was a metaphorical death.
Well, that would go a long way to explain the lack of physical trauma on Zampano's
This is
person when
all
they.
this is all thoughts that I have had just trying to figure how Zappano died and the fact that Johnny has a scratch on his neck with the encounter with the creature. This is all
Mhm.
coming from that. I
I
could
don't
be
know.
so far off. I like these are just ideas I'm throwing into the ether because it's just thoughts I'm having because that's kind of the point of this, right? I could be very very wrong. It could come out by the end of the book that both of them are two separate people and the idea as we have been presented is 100% fact. And I'm just talking out of my ass right now, but I do feel like it's a little more fun to think about that as we continue through the next.
I think that's an interesting idea, but doesn't the well, some of the things that we've already run into where they talk about at least the editors they mentioned that I mean I guess it's possible for the editors to also be a fabrication, but they seem to be in at least in somewhat of contact with Johnny. Like they'll they said that they'll say things like, "Oh, we reached out to Johnny for a comment on this, and he declined to elaborate further." Or they also mention go to look at the appendix for like, okay, this is Johnny's father's uh, what do you call it, obituary, and then there was also letters. They mentioned letters that Johnny's mother wrote to him at some point. That's something that I would like to look at later. I know I saw that in a footnote, and I was like, okay, well, I need to look at that. But I just wanted to keep going, so I didn't really look at it at the time. Maybe I should have, but I don't know. I'm inclined to believe that Johnny is real, at least within the context of the story. You know,
I think the idea of Johnny is real, but I'm starting to have doubts about the character of Johnny.
could be. I think we'll. I guess we'll have to keep going. But I just that is an interesting idea that Johnny does not exist. You become a Johnny truther.
I think I've been a Johnny Falser.
I guess that's a better way to put it. A Johnny Falser. But so I guess if your postulation is then that Johnny is not real, then does that mean does that follow that Navidson and this whole thing is not real?
Well, we're supposed to be questioning that ever since the introduction of the novel because Johnny himself is saying that he has no evidence to suggest that any of this is real, that this movie exists, and all that other stuff.
Yes, yes, that
So
is
we're
definitely
supposed to
true.
have skepticism about Navidson already.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is yeah that I think is that we're getting back to what my initial question was is like so you are saying that you don't think that any of this the Navidson business none of it happened even within the context of the story.
Um, I'm gonna say maybe, but I think it is irrelevant because I think the more important question is can we truly trust that Johnny Truant and Zappano are real? Because maybe the Davidson record is not so much a compilation of a very very niche movie that is so underground that it's basically in the core of the earth. Uh, but if it's more so a not a metaphor, but I guess a conduit to tell the story of Johnny Truant's descent into madness, so to say,
Hmm.
Be- because we have to we have to concede a lot of conveniences to believe that the Davidson record is real. The biggest one being the fact that a blind man is accurately transcribing a visual movie.
Yeah, that they do mention that, and that's something we talked about. I think last time as well. It just, I guess my question is then, is this Zampano or Johnny or the person that is created both Zampano and Johnny? How, I guess, is this them giving a backstory, a fictitious backstory to whatever this entity is that is haunting them, that that caused the scratch in Johnny's neck, and that may that killed Zampano? It's like, so how does where does this thing come from then? If not from the uh, the narrative presented in the Navidson record.
Hmm.
I
It
don't
very
know.
well could be a cursed object, like the House of Leaves is a cursed object, and the person who has or reads the House of Leaves picks up the curse, kind of like the videotape in The Ring,
Hmm.
like something similar to that. Like maybe it's something like that, to where it's
In the narrative though of the ring, the monster, the ring monster is real, and like things happen to her that created her in that way. But that's, I guess it's just like,
it's not
but
supposed to be a
they.
one to one. More so
Oh,
just the
okay,
idea of
fair.
the cursed object, where it's like you watch the tape, you die in 7 days, you read the House of Leaves, you're being stalked by this creature.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess it's interesting. It's interesting that if that is the case, that is, you read this book, and it's even fictional within the context of the story, the world of the story, whatever this creature is, that they created this fake backstory for themselves for you to read, and then it begins to attack you after you've read its fake backstory.
Yeah, which I realize we're spending a lot of time on my majorly hypothetical theories that might end up being complete bullshit. But I don't know. I feel like it's something worth thinking about at this point. And if I'm wrong, then well, at least had fun theory crafting.
No, I think it was this is good, very good. I think it was an interesting it's an interesting point. I think that we, not to do like self crit here in the middle of what we're doing here, but we've talked a lot about the characters and a good bit about the plot, but we've not really done a lot of metatextual thinking, which is, or maybe not a lot, but we've done some, but it's just like we've not gone into this kind of idea, which is, I think, a good part of what your thinking is, what Danielewski is asking you to think about whenever whenever you're reading the House of Leaves.
We definitely picked a hell of a book to start off with.
Yeah, in
I'm not
retrospect,
gonna I'm not
go
gonna
ahead.
say what the next one's going to be because we've already chosen our next book. It's this was the how we will I will say the House of Leaves was your choice, and the next book we're doing is my choice, and we've already decided on that, and I won't say what it is. Uh, I definitely think my book is going to be a much more casual discussion kind of book, where it's just us talking about hopefully how cool the book is. Neither of us have read it, so we'll see. But yeah, we definitely picked a very, very like metaphysical, deep, and just intricate book where I don't think we are supposed to take anything we're reading at face value, and it warrants deep discussions that may not lead to anywhere, just like the hallway. And we're just kind of left scratching our heads, being like, "Well, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to keep going and see."
Yeah, I think that is something that Danielewski through Johnny has even said a couple of times. Um, I think that's, but I think you're right. I think we really jumped into the deep end, starting with House of Leaves.
Yeah, but I will say, one thing that I think has been really great about this, about us doing this, is that whether or not it's true, that whole theory I came up with,
Hmm.
I only thought of it because we were discussing the book. So if I was just reading it on my own, I don't think I would have gotten to a mindset to where I would consider things like this. Just reading it on my own in my room, just, only with my own thoughts on it. So even if it's wrong, I think being able to talk about it like this with you every week has made me approach it in a very different way and has made me realize things about it in the midst of conversation about it that I may not have picked up on during that read through, but had to have a step back, one, a different perspective through you, and two, just kind of global look at it outside of the page to really kind of have some things click for me. So that's really nice.
Yeah, I think this has been very good so far. I've really much enjoyed it. One thing I would like to do a little bit, just this is, I guess, a little bit of a peek ahead, is once we finish, I guess, going through the book, and once we finish, kind of, we feel pretty confident about, we can come up with, we can, whether we have the same interpretation by the end or not, whenever we're secure in what we're thinking. That's something I would like to do, is like kind of maybe do a little research of what is the broader reading public, people have read through this book, what do they think is going on, and I would like to compare how wherever we end up, um, with what the consensus is, and or if there even is a consensus, and I guess maybe I'd like to interface with that a little bit.
Yeah, with that, I think that marks a very good stopping point for us for today. We've gone on pretty long on what I think is another interesting episode on the House of Leaves, to say the least.
Yeah, I think this is what's funny is, to me, sometimes it doesn't feel like we've gotten very far, and I think this is just the nature of talking about this book, is because you can go down these innumerable hallways, if you will, but it's just like you feel like it's, I don't know. I feel like we could talk about this book for a very long time, but I think we've actually made some good progress here.
Yeah, I feel like this book is the 5.5 minute hallway where you read it and you're like 5.5 minutes, and then you get into it and you're like, oh, there's like an endless staircase to explore down here. Like, what am I doing?
There's an endless staircase, and for some reason, animals can't pass through it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just, we've hit like, I think, ballparking it in terms of like raw content. We've hit like 4 hours worth of discussion for this book so far, and it's only 100 pages worth. And even then, we haven't covered everything that's happened in those 100 pages. It's a very dense book. Dare I say, it's the inverse Skyrim.
It's yeah, it is very dense. I don't know. I don't know how many more episodes we'll be able to, like, if we're doing we've got 4 hours in like 100 pages, and this is 700 pages. Well, I think that starts to get a little bit. I don't know. I think
Yeah, I think
go
I
ahead.
think we're on the threshold of when we start getting the wonky pages where I think, honestly, in terms of raw content, we're probably somewhere in the ballpark of like a third of the way through. That's purely a guess because it is about to condense in terms of how many words we have left in this book and how many pages we have left in this book. Because I just kind of did like a where you just you just I've just did like a little scan through the pages where I just thumb through the book, and yeah, we're about to hit that point where we get the weird formats and maybe one or two words on a page. I saw one where it's a literal blank page. So I think our pace through this book is about to exponentially jump up, and I would not be surprised if by next week we're talking about things that have happened on page 2 or 300.
Yeah, well, wherever we end up landing, I'm looking forward to discussing that again.
Yep, I am too. This has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing more of this because this is really, I think, one, it's helped me read more like I wanted it to do, and two, it's really helped me approach a book like The House of Leaves differently than I would have, like I said. So I think this has been a very, very net positive for us.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd like to, thanks everybody that's listening, and I guess we will see you next time.
Yep. See you next week.